On my 76th birthday, my daughter handed me a small, matte black box wrapped in silver ribbon. It looked innocent enough. Inside was a pair of wireless earbuds. 3 days later, I stood on the wet pavement outside her building and watched as a SWAT team kicked down her door. I watched as they dragged her out in handcuffs while the neighbors stared and whispered. They called me a monster. They said I was a cold-hearted old man who turned on his own flesh and blood. They did not know that the earbuds were not a gift. They were a leash. And they did not know that sometimes to save the person you love most in the world, you have to let them walk through hell first. If you have ever had to make a choice that broke your heart to save your family, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments where you are watching from. I am Henry Caldwell, and this is how a pair of headphones almost destroyed my life. The night it started, the rain was hammering against the floor-to-ceiling glass windows of my son-in-law Brian's penthouse apartment in downtown Seattle. It was a cold Tuesday in November, but inside the air was stiflingly hot and smelled of expensive cologne and ambition. It was my 76th birthday. I did not want a party. I especially did not want a party here in this glass cage that floated 40 stories above the city I had helped build. But Lily insisted. My daughter Lily has always been the softest part of me. She has her mother's eyes and a heart that is too big for this cruel world. I stood by the window holding a glass of champagne that had gone warm in my hand. I was watching the traffic lights blur in the rain below. I felt like a ghost at my own funeral. The room was filled with people I did not know. They were Brian's friends. Men in slim fit suits who talked about cryptocurrency and leverage and seed rounds. Women who looked like they were carved out of marble and ice. They looked right through me. To them was just the old relic in the corner. The father-in-law. The retired systems engineer who probably needed help opening a PDF file. They had no idea that for 30 years I built the security architecture that keeps the planes they fly in from falling out of the sky. They saw wrinkles. I saw vulnerabilities. Brian came over and clapped a hand on my shoulder. His grip was a little too tight. His palm was damp. "Happy birthday, Henry, having a good time?" he asked. His voice was loud. Too loud. It was the voice of a man trying to sell something. Brian is 35 years old. He calls himself a venture capitalist. I call him a gambler in a tailored suit. He has a smile that shows too many teeth and 8 eyes that never quite stop moving. "I am fine, Brian," I said. I pulled away slightly. "Where is Lily?" "Oh, you know her," Brian said, waving his hand dismissively toward the kitchen. "She is fussing over the cake. Wants everything to be perfect for her daddy." He laughed, but the sound did not reach his eyes. I looked toward the kitchen. Lily was standing by the island. She was arranging candles on a cake. From this distance, she looked fragile. She has lost weight recently. Her collarbones were sharp ridges under her silk dress. She was moving with a kind of nervous energy that set my teeth on edge. A father knows things. You watch your child grow from a stumbling toddler to a woman, and you learn the language of their body. I knew Lily's language, and right now her body was screaming that she was terrified. I started to walk toward her, but Brian stepped in my path. He blocked my view. "So Henry," he said, lowering his voice, "I heard the consultancy contract with AeroGuard is coming up for renewal. You still holding the keys to the kingdom over there?" I looked at him. This was what it was always about with Brian. Information, access, leverage. I retired 5 years ago, but I stayed on as a senior consultant. I hold the legacy codes, the old foundational systems that the new kids do not understand. "I am just a glorified advisor now, Brian," I said. "I keep the old mainframes from overheating." Brian smirked. "You are too modest, Henry. We all know you are the only one who knows where the bodies are buried in that code." Before I could answer, Lily came out with the cake. The room went quiet. Everyone sang happy birthday. I blew out the candles. I wished for the one thing I could not have. I wished for my wife Catherine to be here. She would have seen through Brian in a second. She would have known what to do. "Open your gifts," Brian shouted. He was acting like a ringmaster at a circus. He pushed a pile of bags toward me. I opened a bottle of scotch from a man I did not know. I opened a cashmere scarf from a woman who did not learn my name. Then Lily stepped forward. She was holding a small box. Her hands were shaking, not a little tremble. They were vibrating. "Happy birthday, Dad," she whispered. Her voice was thin. It sounded like it was being squeezed out of a tight throat. I took the box. Her fingers brushed mine. Her skin was ice cold. It was 80 degrees in the apartment, but my daughter was freezing. "Thank you, sweetheart," I said gently. I looked her in the eyes. I tried to catch her gaze. I tried to ask her silently what was wrong. But she looked away. She looked at Brian. It was a quick, darting glance, like a dog checking with its master before eating. "Open it," Brian said. He was standing right behind her. He was standing too close. I pulled the silver ribbon. I lifted the lid. Inside, nestled in black foam, was a pair of earbuds. They were sleek and matte black. No brand logo, no markings. They looked industrial. "Earbuds?" I asked. Brian stepped in. He put his hand on Lily's back. I saw her flinch. Just a tiny movement. But I saw it. "Not just earbuds," Henry Brian said. "These are top of the line. A prototype from a startup in Silicon Valley I am advising. They use bone conduction technology. Military grade." I looked at the small black devices. I know technology. I know that military grade usually means built by the lowest bidder. But these looked different. They looked expensive. Lily spoke up. She sounded like she was reciting a script. "I know you like to listen to your audiobooks on the train, Dad. And you always complain about the construction noise near your office. These have active noise cancellation. I thought they would help you focus. Help me focus on what I wondered." I looked at Lily. She was wringing her hands together. She was twisting her wedding ring round and round on her finger. "That is very thoughtful, Lily," I said. "Put them on," Brian insisted. He was already pulling his phone out. "Let us set them up for you. You know how tricky Bluetooth can be for your generation." I felt a flash of irritation. I wrote code in assembly language before Brian was born. I can handle Bluetooth. But I handed him my phone. I wanted to see what he would do. Brian took my phone. He moved fast. Too fast. He opened the settings. He took the earbuds out of the case. He did not put them in pairing mode the normal way. He held them against the back of my phone. I saw a flash of code run across the screen. It was there and gone in a microsecond. If I had blinked, I would have missed it. But I did not blink. "What was that?" I asked. "What was what?" Brian said. He smiled. He handed the phone back to me. "All paired. Simple right. Put them in." I hesitated. My gut was twisting. It was that feeling I used to get 20 years ago when I was hunting for a bug in the system. The feeling that something was wrong in the structure. But everyone was watching. Lily was watching. Her eyes were wide and pleading. She wanted me to accept the gift. She needed me to accept the gift. I put the earbuds in. They fit perfectly, too perfectly. They formed a seal that instantly sucked the sound out of the room. The chatter of the guests disappeared. The rain against the glass vanished. There was just a deep, heavy silence. Then music started playing. It was Mozart. The sound was crystal clear. It felt like the orchestra was inside my skull. "Incredible, right?" Brian said. I could hear his voice through the earbuds. It sounded synthesized, processed. "Very impressive," I said. I took them out. I put them back in the case. Brian frowned. Keep them in Henry. Test them out. Walk around. I am tired, Brian, I said. I looked at Lily. I wanted to grab her arm. I wanted to drag her out of there. But I could not. Not with 20 witnesses. Not when I did not know what game was being played. Thank you for the party, Lily. I am going to head home. But you just got here, Brian protested. I ignored him. I walked to the door. I put the black box in the inside pocket of my jacket. It sat right against my chest, right over my heart. Lily followed me to the elevator. The guests had already lost interest. They were back to their drinks. Dad, she said. She stopped at the elevator doors. Yes, honey, I said. I waited. Tell me. Please tell me. She looked at me. Her lip trembled. She looked back at the apartment. She looked at the camera mounted in the corner of the hallway. I hope you like them, she said. Her voice was flat. Dead. Use them, Dad. Please. They will help you. The elevator doors opened. I stepped in. I looked at my daughter. She looked like a prisoner saying goodbye to a visitor. I love you, Lily, I said. The doors closed. As the elevator plummeted down 40 floors, I took the box out of my pocket. I opened it. The little green light on the charging case was blinking. It was a slow, steady rhythm, blink, blink, blink. It looked like a heartbeat, or a countdown. I walked out into the cold Seattle rain. I did not call a cab. I walked to the corner and stood under the awning of a coffee shop. I looked at the earbuds. Brian said they were prototypes. He said they were for music. But I had seen the code on my screen, and I had felt the temperature of my daughter's hands. I took my phone out. I looked at the Bluetooth devices list. The earbuds were listed simply as gift. I am not a paranoid man. I am a logical man, and logic told me that you do not give a retired security consultant a piece of advanced tracking technology unless you want to know where he goes, or unless you want to hear what he says. I put the earbuds back in my pocket. I kept my hand over them. I could feel a faint heat coming from the case. They were active. They were working. I should have thrown them in the trash. I should have smashed them with my heel right there on the pavement. Any sane man would have. But I remembered Lily's eyes. I remembered the way she said, "Please use them, Dad." She was not giving me a gift. She was giving me a message. Or maybe she was giving me the weapon I would need to save her. I buttoned my coat. I turned my collar up against the wind. I was going to find out what these little black things really were. And God help Brian if I was right. Because he thought he was tracking a senile old man. He did not realize he had just put a wiretap on a bomb. I walked into the darkness of the city holding the Trojan horse against my chest. The game had begun. The next morning, I walked into the lobby of AeroGuard Systems with a cup of black coffee in one hand and a burning knot in my stomach. The young security guard at the front desk nodded at me with that mix of respect and pity they save for the old-timers who used to run the place. I swiped my badge. It still worked. I had retired 5 years ago, but they kept me on the payroll as a legacy consultant because nobody else knew how to talk to the mainframe in the basement without making it crash. The air inside the building was cool and smelled of ozone and floor wax. It was a smell that used to calm me. Today, it just made me feel exposed. I took the service elevator down to the sub-basement. This was where the real work happened, away from the glass-walled executive offices on the top floors. I was looking for Mike Sargent. We called him Sarge not because he was bossy, but because he had spent 30 years in Army intelligence before he came to work as the head of physical security here. Mike was the kind of man who checked the exits before he sat down in a restaurant. He was the most paranoid man I knew, and right now paranoia was exactly what I needed. I found him in his office, which was really just a glass cage surrounded by server racks. He was staring at a bank of monitors that showed every corner of the building. When he saw me, he did not smile. He just unlocked the door with a buzz. "You look like hell, Henry," he said. His voice was gravel and smoke. He spun his chair around. "Thanks, Mike," I said. I sat down on the metal folding chair opposite him. I did not waste time with small talk. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the matte black box. I set it on the desk between us. "My daughter gave me a birthday present last night," I said. Mike looked at the box. He did not touch it. He looked at me. His eyes were narrow behind his wire-rimmed glasses. "Since when does Lily buy you tech?" he asked. He knew Lily. He knew she still bought DVDs because she did not trust streaming services. "Since her husband started advising hardware startups in Silicon Valley," I said. "Brian gave it to her to give to me. Said they are prototypes. Bone conduction. Noise canceling." Mike snorted. He reached out and flipped the lid open with a pen. He stared at the smooth black earbuds nesting in the foam. "Fancy," he grunted. "Too fancy. No branding. No serial numbers on the case. Where's the FCC compliance sticker?" "That is what I was wondering," I said. I leaned forward. Brian paired them to my phone. He did it fast. Too fast. And when I put them in the case, felt warm. Mike's face changed. The boredom vanished. He sat up straighter. He opened his desk drawer and pulled out a device that looked like a bulky walkie-talkie with a stubby antenna. It was an RF scanner, a radio frequency spectrum analyzer. "Let us see what these little birds are singing," he said. He switched the scanner on. The screen lit up with a jagged green line that danced along the bottom. That was the background noise. The Wi-Fi. The cell signals from the street above. It was normal. Then he used his pen to lift one of the earbuds out of the case. The scanner screamed. It was not a literal scream. It was a high-pitched electronic squeal that made my teeth ache. The green line on the screen shot up and turned red. It spiked so hard it went off the top of the display. Mike cursed softly. He did not hesitate. He grabbed a silver pouch from his desk. It was a Faraday bag lined with metallic mesh designed to block all radio signals. He swept the earbud and the case into the bag and sealed it tight. The screaming stopped. The line on the scanner dropped back to a lazy green wiggle. The silence in the room was heavy. I could hear the hum of the server fans through the glass. I could hear my own heart thumping in my ears. "That was not Bluetooth," Henry Mike said. His voice was very quiet. "That signal was dancing around the 2.4 gigahertz band, but it was hopping frequencies like a bumhobbit on speed. That is military encryption." I felt a cold wave wash over me. I had suspected something, but suspecting and knowing are two different kinds of pain. "What does it do?" I asked. Mike put on a pair of magnifying goggles. He reached into a drawer and pulled out a set of precision screwdrivers and a scalpel. He opened the Faraday bag, just enough to slide his hand in. "I am going to void the warranty," he said. "Do it," I said. He took one of the earbuds out. He did not treat it gently this time. He clamped it into a small vise on his desk. He took the scalpel and ran it along the seam of the black plastic casing. It was glued shut tight. He had to use force. With a sharp crack, the plastic shell popped open. We both leaned in. It was a masterpiece of miniaturization. I have designed circuit boards. I know what consumer electronics look like inside. They are messy. They are built for cost. This was built for war. There was no speaker driver. Instead, there was a dense copper coil for the bone conduction. But nestled behind it was a chip I did not recognize. It was black and featureless, and wired directly to it was a component that made my blood run cold. "Is that a GPS module?" I asked. Mike nodded grimly. "Real time. accurate to within 3 feet. But look at this. He pointed to a tiny silver square near the battery. That is a proximity data siphon, he said. I stared at it. I had heard of them, but I had never seen one in the wild. Explain it to me, I said. I needed to hear him say it. It creates a near-field handshake with any device it is close to, Mike said, like when you tap your credit card to pay. But this does not just pay, it queries. If you have this in your ear and your phone is in your pocket, it bypasses the operating system security. It uses the Bluetooth protocol as a tunnel. It sucks everything. Contacts, emails, passwords, keystrokes. It is a vampire, I whispered. Worse, Mike said. It is a microphone, too. See this membrane here? That is a high-gain mic. It listens to you. It listens to the room. And because it uses bone conduction, it can even pick up the vibrations of your own voice box before you speak. He sat back and took off the goggles. He looked at me with a mixture of anger and fear. Henry, who gave you this, really? Brian, I said. My voice sounded hollow. My son-in-law. Does he know what you do? Mike asked. I mean, really know. Does he know about the legacy project? I nodded slowly. He knows I consult. He knows I have the admin keys for the redundancy systems at SeaTac and Boeing Field. He made a joke about it last night. He asked if I still held the keys to the kingdom. Mike swore. He stood up and paced the small room. This is not a gift, Henry. This is an extraction tool. He did not give you headphones. He bugged you. He turned you into a walking, talking access point. If you had walked into the server room with these in your ears, he could have sniffed the handshake protocol for the entire airport security grid. I closed my eyes. I saw Lily's face again. I saw her trembling hands. She knew, I thought. She knew what they were. That is why she was scared. Or maybe she did not know everything. Maybe she just knew her husband was up to something bad. Can you kill it? I asked. Mike looked at the dissected mess on his desk. I already killed this one. The other one is in the bag. But Henry, if this thing was active since last night, it has already uploaded whatever it stole. My phone, I said. I pulled my smartphone out of my pocket. Mike snatched it from my hand. He plugged it into his secure terminal. His fingers flew across the keyboard. Lines of code cascaded down the screen. He is good, Mike muttered. The malware disguised itself as a system update. It masked its data usage. It has been trickling data out all night. Photos, messages. Did it get the keys? I asked. My heart was hammering. The keys were not just passwords. They were complex cryptographic tokens that allowed deep access to the air traffic control routing systems. If someone had those keys, they could ground every plane on the West Coast. Or worse, they could make planes disappear from the radar. Mike typed a final command. He hit enter. The screen flashed red, then green. No, he said. He let out a long breath. The keys are stored in the secure enclave of your phone. The siphon tried to grab them, but the encryption held. For now. For now, I repeated. It installed a backdoor, Mike said. It is dormant, waiting for a trigger. If you had walked near the secure servers here at AeroGuard, the handshake would have completed. It would have pulled the keys out of the air. So he needs me to come here, I said. He needs me to physically be near the mainframes. That is why he gave them to you, Mike said. He expected you to wear them to work. He is using you as a mule, Henry. A digital drug mule. I looked at the broken plastic on the table. It looked like a dead beetle. My son-in-law was not just a bad gambler. He was not just an arrogant kid with too much debt. He was a traitor. He was planning an attack on the infrastructure of the country. And he was using my love for my daughter to do it. Do not call the police yet, Mike said. I looked at him. Why? Because if you call the cops now, Brian will see the signal die. He will know the gig is up. He will run, or he will hurt Lily. He is right. I thought about the fear in Lily's eyes. If Brian was desperate enough to do this, he was desperate enough to use her as a shield. What do we do? I asked. Mike picked up the soldering iron. We perform surgery, he said. I can bypass the siphon. I can kill the data stream. But I can leave the microphone active. Why would we do that? Because you are going to put them back on, Mike said. You are going to walk out of here and you are going to let him listen to you. We are going to feed him a story, Henry. We are going to make him believe he won, and then, when he comes to collect the prize, we are going to bury him. I watched as Mike worked. His hands were steady. He was a master craftsman of deception. I sat there in the cold light of the server room and felt a part of my soul freeze over. I had spent my life protecting systems, protecting people. I had been a good father, a patient father. But looking at that black bug on the table, I realized that the time for patience was over. Brian wanted to listen. Fine. I would give him something to listen to. Fix it, Mike, I said. Fix it so he can hear me breathe. Fix it so he can hear my heartbeat. I want him to think he has me on a leash. Mike looked up at me. He saw the look in my eyes. He did not say anything. He just nodded and went back to work. 10 minutes later, I walked out of the building. The rain had stopped, but the sky was still gray. I put the earbuds in my ears. They felt cold. I tapped the side. I knew the microphone was live. I knew Brian was somewhere in the city, probably sitting in front of a bank of monitors, wearing headphones, waiting for a signal. I cleared my throat. Test 1, 2, I muttered to myself like an old man trying to figure out technology. Is this thing on? I waited. I imagined Brian smiling. I imagined him leaning back in his chair thinking he had outsmarted the relic. I walked toward my car. I was not Henry the victim anymore. I was Henry the bait. And the trap was set. I walked out of Mike's office and stood in the gray light of the parking garage. The modified earbuds were back in my pocket, but they felt heavy now, heavier than plastic and circuitry should ever feel. They felt like a verdict. I sat in my car for a long time, staring at the rain streaking down the windshield. I thought about Lily. I thought about the little girl who used to sit on my lap while I debugged code, the teenager who cried when her goldfish died, the woman who looked so terrified last night in her glass tower. Did she know? That was the question that was tearing me apart. Was she a victim or was she an accomplice? Part of me wanted to drive straight to the police station, but another part, the part that was still a father, needed to know for sure. I needed to know if the rot had spread to the only family I had left. I drove to Pioneer Square. It is the old part of Seattle where the bricks are red and the history is thick. I parked the car and put the earbuds in. They connected instantly with that same soft chime. I knew Mike had killed the data siphon, but left the microphone live. Brian was listening. Somewhere in the city, he was sitting in front of a dashboard, watching my GPS dot move and listening to my breathing. I started walking. I kept my pace slow, the pace of an old man taking a stroll. I stopped to look at a shop window. I bought a coffee. I made sure to let the ambient noise of the city filter through the microphone. I wanted him to hear the buskers. I wanted him to hear the traffic. I wanted him to feel like he was right there with me. Then I pulled out my phone. I dialed the number for the weather service. It is an old trick. You talk to a recording, but to anyone listening on a wiretap, it sounds like a conversation. Hey, Bob, I said. My voice was casual. Just checking in. Yeah, I am downtown. Just needed some fresh air. I paused. I let the silence stretch. I imagined Brian leaning forward in his chair. Listen, Bob, I said, lowering my voice just a fraction. About that project we discussed. The Red Wing archive. Yeah, the legacy backup. I know the board thinks it was destroyed in the server migration of '99, but I kept a copy. I paused again. I was improvising, but the details were grounded in truth. The Red Wing project was real. It was a defunct security protocol worth millions to the right buyer on the black market. No, it is not digital, I said. It is on an old magnetic tape drive. Cannot hack what is not online, right? I have it stored in a secure locker at King Street Station. Locker 404. I let out a small chuckle. Yeah, error 404. File not found. My little joke. Anyway, I am going to head over there now and pick it up. I think it is time we finally leveraged that asset. It is worth at least $20 million to the private sector. I hung up. I did not go to the station immediately. I walked into a cafe across the street from the main entrance of King Street Station. I ordered a sandwich I had no intention of eating. I sat by the window. I had a perfect view of the station's clock tower and the drop-off zone. I checked my watch. It was 11:15 a.m. If Brian was just a concerned son-in-law, nothing would happen. If he was just tracking me for safety, he would stay where he was. But if he was what Mike said he was, if he was a desperate man hunting for a payday. I waited. The minutes ticked by. I watched the travelers coming and going with their suitcases. I watched the taxis line up. I sipped my cold coffee. At 11:42 a.m., a black Range Rover screeched around the corner. It was moving too fast. It cut across 2 lanes of traffic and slammed on the brakes in the no parking zone right in front of the station entrance. My heart stopped. I knew that car. I had helped pay for the down payment on that car. The driver's door flew open. Brian jumped out. He was not wearing a suit today. He was wearing a hoodie and jeans, but I recognized his frantic movements instantly. He did not even bother to close the car door. He left the engine running. He sprinted toward the station entrance, pushing past a woman with a stroller. He looked wild. He looked like a man who was drowning and had just seen a life raft. I watched him disappear into the station. I sat there frozen. The sandwich on my plate looked like plastic. The noise of the cafe faded away. All I could hear was the sound of my own heart breaking. It was real. It was all real. He was listening. He was desperate. And he had just proven that he was willing to rob me to save himself. But the worst part was yet to come. A few minutes later, Brian came running back out. He looked furious. He was shouting into his phone. He kicked the tire of his car. He had gone to locker 404 and found it empty. He stood there on the sidewalk, scanning the crowd. For a second, his eyes swept over the cafe window where I was sitting. I did not duck. I sat perfectly still. The tint of the glass hid me, but I felt like he could see right into my soul. Then he did something that shattered whatever hope I had left. He made another call. He did not put the phone to his ear. He held it in front of his face on speaker. I pulled the earbuds out of my pocket and put them back in. I wanted to hear. The sound of the traffic was loud, but I heard his voice cut through. "It is not here, Lily," he screamed. The old man lied. "He is playing games." I held my breath. I waited for her to ask what he was talking about. I waited for her to sound confused. Instead, I heard my daughter's voice, tinny and small, through the bone conduction. "Are you sure, Brian?" she asked. Her voice was trembling, but she did not sound surprised. She sounded terrified. Maybe he moved it. "Please, Brian, just come home. Do not do anything crazy." "He lied to me," Brian shouted again. He slammed his hand on the roof of the car. "If he is playing games with me, I will burn his whole life down. I swear to God, Lily, if you tipped him off." "No, I did not, I promise," Lily sobbed. "Just come back. We will figure it out." I took the earbuds out. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped them. She knew, my Lily, my little girl. She was not just an innocent bystander. She knew he was hunting for the drive. She knew he was listening to me. She was helping him. I felt a physical pain in my chest, sharp and deep. It felt like betrayal. It felt like failure. I had spent my whole life protecting her from the world, and now she was conspiring with the very thing that threatened to destroy me. But then I replayed her voice in my head. Please, Brian, just come home. Do not do anything crazy. She did not sound like a partner. She sounded like a hostage. I looked at Brian through the glass. He was pacing by the car, rubbing his face with his hands. He looked dangerous. He looked like a cornered animal. I realized then that this was not just about greed. This was about survival. Brian was in deep trouble. Trouble so deep that he had dragged my daughter down with him. And Lily was doing what she had always done. She was trying to keep the peace. She was trying to manage the monster by feeding him what he wanted. But you cannot feed a monster enough to satisfy it. Eventually, it eats you too. I stood up. I left a $20 bill on the table. I did not look back at the station. I walked out the back door of the cafe into the alley. The test was over. I had my answer. My son-in-law was a wolf, and my daughter was the bait he was using to lure me in. I walked to my car in a daze. I needed a plan. I could not go to the police yet. If Brian was monitoring my location, he would see me heading to the precinct. And if he was this desperate, he might hurt Lily just to spite me. I needed to be smarter. I needed to be the father she needed, not the victim she was creating. I got into my car and sat in the silence. I looked at the earbuds in my hand. They were small and black and cold. You want to play games, Brian? I whispered to the empty car. Okay, let us play. I put the car in gear. I was not going to the police. I was going to dinner. I was going to walk into the lion's den and look him in the eye. I was going to make him believe that I was just a foolish old man who had forgotten where he put his treasure. I was going to give him one last chance to confess. And if he did not, I was going to burn his world to the ground. I drove to the penthouse with a bottle of expensive Cabernet in the passenger seat and a cold fury settling in my chest. It was 7 in the evening, and the rain had started up again, blurring the city lights into streaks of red and gold. Most men in my position would have been terrified. Most men would have been driving to the nearest precinct to file a report. But I was not most men. I was a father who had just realized his little girl was living in a cage, and I needed to see exactly how strong the bars were before I tried to break them. I parked my car down the street, avoiding the valet. I walked past the doorman, who knew me by name but looked surprised to see me back so soon. I took the elevator up the 40 floors, feeling the pressure change in my ears. With every floor that passed, I pushed my anger down deeper, burying it under layers of confusion and frailty. I needed to be the old man they thought I was. I needed to be the clueless retired engineer who just wanted to apologize for a misunderstanding. When I rang the doorbell, it took a long time for anyone to answer. I heard muffled voices inside. Angry voices. Then silence. Then footsteps. Brian opened the door. He looked like a man who had been running a marathon in his living room. His hair was disheveled, and there was a sheen of sweat on his upper lip. He was wearing the same clothes he had worn at the station, but he had tried to straighten them out. When he saw me, his eyes went wide. For a second, I saw pure, unadulterated panic. Then the mask slid back into place. "Henry," he said. He forced a smile that looked more like a grimace. What a surprise. I held up the wine bottle. My hand was trembling slightly. It was an act, but it was also real. "I felt terrible about today, Brian," I said. My voice was raspy. "The locker at the station. I went there and it was empty. I must have gotten the number wrong. My memory is not what it used to be. I wanted to come by and apologize. Maybe we could have dinner." Brian stared at me. He was scanning my face, looking for a lie. He was looking for any sign that I had seen him at the station, any sign that I knew he was the one who had raided the locker. But I gave him nothing. I just gave him the tired, apologetic eyes of a father-in-law who wanted to be useful. "Come in," Henry Bryan said. He stepped aside, but his body was tense. He looked like a coiled spring. The apartment was freezing. The air conditioning was blasting, which was strange because it was a cool November night. But despite the cold, the air felt thick. It smelled of burnt garlic and stress. Lily was in the kitchen. She was standing with her back to us, stirring a pot on the stove. She was wearing a thick, oversized turtleneck sweater and long sweatpants. It was the kind of outfit you wear on a snow day, not for a dinner party in a climate-controlled penthouse. "Lily, look who is here," Bryan announced loudly. His voice echoed in the cavernous room. She turned around slowly. When she saw me, the color drained from her face, leaving her skin translucent and gray. She dropped the wooden spoon. It clattered against the marble counter. "Dad," she whispered. "What are you doing here?" "Just visiting, sweetheart," I said. I walked over to her. I wanted to hug her, but I was afraid she would shatter. "I brought wine," Bryan said. He took the bottle from my hand a little too roughly. "I will open it. You two catch up." He walked to the wet bar, but he did not take his eyes off us. He was watching every movement. I sat down at the kitchen island. Lily went back to stirring the pot. Her movements were mechanical. Jerky. "Are you okay, honey?" I asked. "You look tired." "I am fine," she said quickly. Too quickly. "Just a headache." "It is freezing in here, Lily," I said. "Why are you bundled up like that?" She pulled the sleeves of her sweater down until they covered her knuckles. "I just get cold easily," she mumbled. "You know that, Dad." I knew nothing of the sort. Lily had always been the one who ran hot. She was the one who wore shorts in April. But I did not press it. Not yet. We sat down to dinner 10 minutes later. It was pasta, but nobody was eating. The only sound in the room was the scraping of silverware against china and the hum of the refrigerator. Bryan was drinking the wine like it was water. He kept checking his phone, which sat face up on the table next to his plate. "So Henry," Bryan said, breaking the silence. He did not look at me. He was stabbing a piece of penne. "About that drive, you said you might have the locker number wrong." I took a sip of water. I took my time. "I must have," I said. "I have been racking my brain all afternoon. Maybe it was locker 405. Or maybe I left it at the bank deposit box on 4th Street. Bryan stopped chewing. His grip on the fork tightened until his knuckles turned white. "You should try to remember, Henry," he said. His voice was low, dangerous. "That drive is important. You said so yourself. $20 million, right?" "That is right," I said. "But why are you so interested, Bryan? I thought you were busy with your startups." He looked up at me then. His eyes were cold and dead. "I am just trying to help you manage your assets, Henry. You cannot leave that kind of money lying around. It is dangerous." The threat hung in the air like smoke. Lily suddenly stood up. "I will get more water," she said. Her voice was brittle. She reached for the crystal pitcher in the center of the table. Her hand was shaking so badly, the ice cubes chimed against the glass. She lifted the heavy pitcher. As she poured water into my glass, her sleeve rode up. Just 2 inches. But 2 inches was enough. I saw it. On the soft, pale skin of her forearm there were marks. Dark purple and yellow bruises. They were not accidental bumps. They were distinct. 4 oval shapes on one side and a thumb mark on the other. Someone had grabbed her. Someone had grabbed her hard enough to crush the blood vessels beneath the skin. I felt the world tilt on its axis. My vision tunneled. The rage that exploded in my chest was so hot, I thought it would burn through my ribcage. I wanted to reach across the table and wrap my hands around Bryan's throat. I wanted to squeeze until the light went out of his eyes. But I sat still. I forced my heart to keep beating in a steady rhythm. "Oh, Lily," I said softly. "Careful." She saw me looking. She gasped and yanked her sleeve down. She spilled water all over the tablecloth. "I am so clumsy," she stammered. "I am so sorry." Brian stared at the spreading water stain. He looked disgusted. "Jesus!" "Lily," he snapped. "Pay attention." Just then his phone buzzed. It was a long, aggressive vibration against the table. Brian looked at the screen and his face went pale. He stood up abruptly. "I have to take this," he said. "Do not touch anything." He walked out onto the balcony, sliding the heavy glass door shut behind him. I watched him answer the phone. He was pacing back and forth, waving his free arm. He looked like he was arguing. He looked like he was pleading. I turned to Lily. She was wiping the water with a napkin, her head bowed low. I reached out and put my hand over hers. She flinched, as if I had burned her. "Lily," I whispered. She did not look up. Tears were dripping onto the table. "Lily, look at me." She raised her head. Her eyes were red-rimmed and full of a terror so deep it looked bottomless. "He made you give me those earbuds, didn't he?" I asked. She froze. She stopped breathing. "I know what they are, Lily," I said. My voice was a low rumble. "I know he is listening. I know he is tracking me. And I know he did this to you." I pointed to her arm. She shook her head violently. "No, Dad, please," she whispered. "You have to stop. You do not understand." "I understand that my son-in-law is a traitor and a wife-beater," I hissed. "I am going to the police, Lily. Tonight." "No!" She screamed the word. It was a strangled cry. She grabbed my hand with both of hers. Her grip was desperate. "You cannot," she sobbed. "You cannot go to the police. He is not the only one, Dad. It is not just him." "What do you mean?" I asked. She looked toward the balcony. Brian was still arguing on the phone, his back to us. "He owes money," she whispered. "A lot of money. To bad people. They are watching us, Dad. They are watching you. If you go to the police, if you do not give them the code, they said they would cut me into pieces and mail me to you." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. This was worse than I thought. Brian was not just a desperate gambler. He was a pawn in something much larger. "He promised he would let us go if he got the code," Lily said, tears streaming down her face. "He promised. Please, Dad, just give it to him. I cannot take it anymore. I am so scared." I looked at my brave, beautiful daughter, the girl who used to climb trees, the girl who used to fear nothing. She was broken. He had broken her. I squeezed her hand. "I am going to fix this, Lily," I said. "I promise you." Brian turned around on the balcony. He was hanging up the phone. He looked furious. Lily pulled her hand away. She grabbed her water glass. Her hands were slippery with sweat and fear. The glass slipped. It hit the floor with a sound like a gunshot. Shards of crystal exploded everywhere. Brian slid the door open and stormed back in. The wind from outside followed him in. "What the hell is going on?" he shouted. He looked at the broken glass. He looked at Lily, who was trembling. He looked at me. His eyes narrowed. He looked suspicious. He looked like he smelled a trap. "What were you talking about?" he asked. His voice was low and menacing. "Nothing," I said calmly. I stood up. "I just asked her for a towel." "She is upset, Brian. You should be gentler with her." Brian ignored me. He walked over to Lily. He towered over her. "Did you say anything to him?" he asked her. "No." Lily whimpered. "No, Brian, I swear." He looked at me. There was a new darkness in his eyes. A realization. "You know, do not you, Henry," he said. He did not wait for an answer. He did not need one. The air in the room had changed. The pretense was over. I straightened my jacket. "I am leaving Brian," I said. I walked to the door. My back was to him. I expected him to hit me. I expected him to stop me. Every muscle in my body was braced for impact. But he let me go. "You cannot protect her forever, Henry," he called out as I reached the door. His voice was mocking. "Time is running out. Tick-tock." I opened the door and walked out. I did not look back. As the elevator doors closed, I let the mask fall. I leaned against the metal wall and let the rage wash over me. Lily was right. I could not go to the local police. If I did, Brian would make a call and my daughter would pay the price. He was not working alone. He had handlers. He had an organization behind him. I needed something bigger than the police. I needed a sledgehammer. I took the earbuds out of my pocket. I put them in my ears. I knew Brian was listening now. I knew he was tracking me. "Good," I whispered. I walked out to my car. I drove into the night. I was not going home. I was going to war. And if Brian and his friends wanted a code, I would give them one. I would give them a code that would bring their whole world crashing down on their heads. The dinner with the devil was over. Now it was time for the reckoning. I drove home in a silence that felt heavy and suffocating. The rain had stopped, but the roads were slick and black, reflecting the streetlights like mirrors. I did not go to the bedroom. I went straight to the basement. This was my sanctuary. It was a windowless room lined with server racks and cooling fans that hummed with a low, steady vibration. To anyone else, it looked like a museum of obsolete technology. To me, it was a fortress. I sat down in my ergonomic chair and turned on the dedicated terminal I kept offline. It was an old machine running a custom Linux kernel I had written myself 15 years ago. It had no Bluetooth, no Wi-Fi card. To connect to it, you had to plug in a physical cable. It was the only place in the world where I felt safe from the invisible eyes and ears Brian had planted on me. I pulled the piece of paper out of my pocket. On it was the IP address Mike had scraped from the earbuds earlier that day. It was just a string of numbers, but to a systems architect, it was a breadcrumb trail. I plugged the Ethernet cable in. I took a deep breath. It was time to hunt. I started by pinging the IP address. As I expected, it was a ghost. It routed through a proxy server in the Cayman Islands, then bounced to a data center in Estonia before disappearing into a Tor node. Brian, or whoever was pulling his strings, knew how to cover their tracks. But they made one mistake. They underestimated patience. I did not try to hack the server directly. That would have triggered an alarm. Instead, I looked for the digital exhaust. Every server leaves a footprint. Power consumption records, ISP traffic logs, billing addresses for the domain registration. It took me 2 hours. 2 hours of staring at scrolling lines of green code while my coffee went cold. But then I found it. A payment gateway. The server hosting the data siphon was being paid for by a shell company called Janus Holdings. I dug into Janus Holdings. I cross-referenced their tax ID with public records. It was a dead end. Just a P.O. box in Delaware. But I kept digging. I followed the money. I accessed the dark web using a secure browser. I have contacts from my days at the NSA, people who owe me favors. I reached out to a forensic accountant I used to work with who now operates in the gray areas of the internet. 20 minutes later, he sent me a file. It was a ledger. I opened it, and my blood ran cold. Janus Holdings was not a venture capital firm. It was a laundry machine. It was a front for a syndicate operating out of Eastern Europe. They moved money, dirty money, billions of dollars in cryptocurrency derived from ransomware attacks and illegal trafficking. And right there in the ledger was a name I recognized. Not Brian's name, but the name of his startup, OmniStream Solutions. I pulled up the transaction history for OmniStream. It was a bloodbath. Brian had not been investing. He had been borrowing. He had leveraged everything. The penthouse, the cars, even Lily's future inheritance, which he had no right to touch. He had started small, taking loans to cover bad crypto bets. But like every gambler, he tried to double down to win it back. He borrowed more. He lost more. The final figure at the bottom of the spreadsheet made me nauseous. $8 million. My son-in-law owed the Russian mob $8 million. I sat back in my chair. The hum of the servers seemed to get louder. It sounded like a swarm of angry hornets. I looked at the dates. The debt had been called in 2 weeks ago. That explained the bruises on Lily's arm. That explained the terror in her eyes. These were not the kind of people who sent late notices. They sent messages written in pain. But there was something else. A note in the ledger next to Brian's account. It was a deadline. 3 days. In 3 days, the debt would be called in full. If he did not pay, they would liquidate the asset. And in their world, liquidating the asset meant erasing the person. But Brian did not have $8 million. He was broke. So how did he plan to pay? I looked at the data again. I looked at the specific demands of the syndicate. They did not just want money. They were moving product. Then it hit me. The realization was so physical, it felt like a punch to the gut. They did not want cash from Brian. They wanted access. I pulled up the schematics for SeaTac Airport. I overlaid the security protocols I had designed. The cargo screening process was automated. It relied on a complex algorithm to flag suspicious containers for physical inspection. If you had the admin keys, the keys I held, you could insert a whitelist command. You could tell the system to ignore a specific container ID. You could let a crate pass through customs without ever being scanned. That was it. Brian was not trying to steal money from the airport. He was trying to smuggle something in or out. Drugs, weapons, maybe something worse. He was going to use my credentials to open a back door in the nation's border security. He was trading national safety for his own skin. I felt a wave of disgust so potent I almost threw up. He was willing to compromise everything. He was willing to put thousands of lives at risk just to cover his gambling losses. And he was using Lily as leverage. I looked at the photo of Lily on my desk. It was taken at her graduation. She looked so happy, so full of hope. She had no idea she was marrying a man who would eventually try to sell her father to terrorists. Or maybe she did know. Maybe that is why she begged me to give him what he wanted. She was not protecting him. She was trying to stop the monsters from coming through the door. I needed to move. I needed to call the FBI right now. I had the evidence. I had the motive. I reached for my secure landline. But before I could lift the receiver, my cell phone buzzed. I looked at it. It was sitting on the desk next to the earbuds. I had taken them out of the Faraday bag to let them listen to the silence of the basement. I wanted Brian to think I was just sulking. The screen lit up. It was a text message. Sender unknown. I hesitated. My hand hovered over the phone. I picked it up and opened the message. There was no greeting, no name, just 3 sentences that froze the blood in my veins. I know you are looking at the ledger, old man. You are smarter than you look. You have 48 hours to give me the keys. If you do not, Lily will succumb to her depression and jump off the balcony. It will be a tragic suicide. I dropped the phone. It clattered onto the desk. He was watching. Not just listening. Watching. I looked around the basement. There were no cameras here. I was sure of it. Then I looked at the earbuds again. The tiny matte black beetles. Mike said they had a proximity sensor, but he did not mention a camera. I grabbed a magnifying glass and held the earbud up to the light. There, right in the center of the outer casing, was a pinhole. It was so small it looked like a flaw in the plastic. But under the glass, I saw the glint of a lens. They had been watching me the whole time. They saw my screen. They saw the files I accessed. I was not the hunter. I was still the prey. I grabbed the earbuds and threw them into the Faraday bag. I sealed it shut with trembling hands. But the damage was done. They knew that I knew. The pretense was over. The deadline had moved up. It was not 3 days anymore. It was 48 hours. 48 hours before my daughter would be thrown off a 40-story building. I sank to the floor. I put my head in my hands. The room spun around me. I could not call the police. If I did, they would execute Lily before the squad car even pulled up to the curb. They had eyes everywhere. I was alone. An old man in a basement with a terrifying secret and a ticking clock. But as I sat there in the darkness, something changed inside me. The fear began to recede, replacing itself with a cold, hard clarity. They thought they had me cornered. They thought that by threatening my daughter, they could force me to betray my country. They did not know Henry Caldwell. They did not know that I had spent 30 years building systems that could withstand hurricanes and earthquakes and cyber attacks. They did not know that when a system is compromised, you do not just patch it. You reboot it. You wipe the slate clean. I stood up. I wiped the sweat from my forehead. I walked over to the old server rack in the corner. I reached behind it and pulled out a dusty heavy metal case. I opened it. Inside was not a computer. Inside was a collection of magnetic tapes and a reel-to-reel player. If they wanted to play a digital game, I would drag them into an analog war. I picked up the phone again. I typed a reply to the unknown number. I need time to decrypt the files. Do not touch her. I hit send. I was buying time, not for me, for the trap I was about to set. I looked at the Faraday bag one last time. You want the keys, Brian, I whispered. I will give you the keys. But you are not going to like what they unlock. I turned off the lights in the basement, leaving only the glow of the monitors. I had work to do, and for the first time in 5 years, I felt fully alive. The engineer was back, and he was angry. I locked the heavy steel door of the basement and slid the deadbolt home. The sound echoed in the small room like a prison gate closing. But I was not the prisoner. I was the warden. Outside in the digital world, Brian and his faceless handlers were probably already tearing apart my firewalls. They were looking for the keys to the airport security grid. They were looking for a way to save their own skins. But down here, they were blind. I walked over to the corner where a large dust-covered tarp sat draped over a bulky shape. I pulled it off. Beneath it was my old IBM mainframe server from 1998. It was a beast of a machine. No Wi-Fi, no Bluetooth, no cloud connectivity. Just raw processing power and cold, hard storage. I powered it up. The cooling fans groaned to life, kicking up a cloud of dust. The hard drives spun up with a high-pitched whine that sounded like music to my ears. This was the hardware that built the modern world. It was ugly and loud and slow by today's standards, but it was secure. You could not hack this machine from a laptop in Russia. You had to be standing right in front of it. I sat down at the terminal. The screen flickered green. I cracked my knuckles. It was time to write some code. Upstairs, my router was blinking frantically. I had left it on as a decoy. I knew Brian had probably hired a team of hackers to brute force my home network. They were probably throwing everything they had at my Wi-Fi, trying to crack my passwords and siphon my files. I let them. I let them break in. I let them scour my empty folders and my vacation photos. Let them think they were winning. Down here in the dark, I was building a bomb. Not an explosive one, a digital one. I needed to create a file that looked like the real security keys. It had to be perfect. It had to have the right file structure, the right encryption headers, the right metadata. If it looked fake for even a second, Brian would know, and Lily would pay the price. But it also had to be a trap. I started typing. My fingers flew across the mechanical keyboard. The clack, clack, clack sound was rhythmic and soothing. I was writing a script in an old coding language that most modern hackers had never bothered to learn. I was burying an executable virus inside a data packet. I called it the Trojan horse. The virus was simple but nasty. Once the file was opened, it would not just display fake codes. It would silently activate every piece of hardware on the host computer. The webcam, the microphone, the location services. And then it would open a reverse tunnel directly to the FBI's cybercrimes division. As I worked, I kept glancing at a framed photograph on my desk. It was black and white. Catherine, my late wife, holding Lily when she was just a baby. Catherine looked so fierce in that picture. She was a lioness. She used to tell me that raising a daughter was the scariest thing in the world because your heart was walking around outside your body. I picked up the photo. My thumb traced Catherine's face. "I am sorry, Cat," I whispered. My voice cracked. "I am sorry I have to use her. I am sorry I have to let her stay in that house with him for another day. But it is the only way." I felt a tear slide down my cheek. It was a heavy burden to place on a child, even a grown one. I was using my own daughter as bait. I was gambling her safety on the hope that Brian was greedy enough to take the bait before he hurt her. But what choice did I have? If I gave him the real codes, thousands of people could die. If I refused, he would kill her. The only way out was through. I worked for 4 hours straight. My back ached. My eyes burned. But finally it was done. I saved the file to a USB drive, a simple silver stick that held the fate of my family. Now came the hard part. Delivery. I could not just email it to him from here. That would reveal that I was working offline. I needed to make him believe that I was just a scared, confused old man who had caved under pressure. I grabbed my coat. I took the USB drive. I unplugged the mainframe and covered it back up. The room went silent again. I walked upstairs. I pulled the earbuds out of the Faraday bag. I put them in my ears. I immediately started acting. I started breathing heavily. I muttered to myself, "Okay. Okay," I whispered. "You win. Just do not hurt her. Please, God, do not hurt her." I walked out of the house. I got into my car and drove to the local library. It was a public place, neutral ground. I walked inside and sat down at one of the public computers. I logged into my email. My hands were shaking, not because I was scared, but because I was angry. I typed Brian's email address. Subject, the keys. I hesitated. I had to sell this. I had to make him believe I was defeated. "Brian," I typed, "I cannot do this anymore. You win. I am too old to fight you, and I cannot lose Lily. I do not know how to send the encrypted files over the secure network. I do not remember the protocols. I put everything on a drive. I hid the drive inside Lily's old laptop, the one she left at your house when she moved in." I paused. I needed a specific detail, something only he would know. "It is in the bottom drawer of the desk in the guest room. The password to the laptop is her birthday. Please just take it and leave us alone." I hit send. I sat back in the plastic chair. The library smelled of old paper and carpet cleaner. It was a quiet place, a peaceful place. But I had just launched a missile. I checked my watch. The email was sent. Brian would get the notification in seconds. He would be reading it right now. He would be smiling. He would think the old man had finally cracked. He would run to the guest room. He would find the laptop. He would think he had won, but he had no idea. I stood up and walked out of the library. The rain had started again. I looked up at the gray sky. "You are on your own now, Brian," I said softly. "You wanted the keys. You got them." I got back in my car. I did not go home. I drove to a parking lot overlooking the city. I sat there in the dark watching the lights of Seattle. Somewhere in that sea of lights, my daughter was living with a monster. And somewhere in that sea of lights, the monster was about to swallow a poison pill. I touched the earbuds in my pocket. I did not put them in. I did not want to hear his victory shout. I wanted to wait for the scream. The analog war was over. The digital trap was sprung. Now all I could do was wait, and pray that my code was as strong as my love for my daughter. I sat in the darkness of my car, parked 3 blocks away from the building, watching a screen that was smaller than a postcard, but held the entire weight of my world. The rain was drumming a steady rhythm on the roof, a soft sound that clashed violently with the storm raging inside my chest. On the passenger seat, my laptop glowed with a grainy black and white feed coming from the camera I had hidden on the bookshelf. It was a low-angle shot, but the picture was clear enough. I could see the living room where I had eaten dinner just hours ago. I could see the empty wine glasses still on the table, and I could see Brian. He had just received my email. I knew the exact moment he read it because his posture changed. For the last hour, he had been pacing like a caged animal, running his hands through his hair, checking the windows, muttering to himself. But when the notification chimed, he froze. He pulled his phone from his pocket and stared at the screen. I saw his shoulders drop. I saw a smile spread across his face that made my stomach turn. It was not a smile of happiness. It was the smile of a man who thinks he has gotten away with murder. He did not suspect a thing. He did not pause to wonder why a stubborn old man would fold so easily. His arrogance was his blind spot. He thought he had broken me. He shoved the phone into his pocket and sprinted toward the guest bedroom. He moved with a frantic energy fueled by greed and fear. I watched the empty living room for a moment, listening to the silence of the feed. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I knew what was coming next. I knew the laptop was there just as I had said, but I also knew the obstacle I had left in his path. A moment later, Brian came back into the frame. He was holding Lily's old silver laptop like it was a holy relic. He slammed it down onto the coffee table and flipped it open. The blue light of the screen illuminated his face, making him look ghastly. He tapped the keyboard furiously. Then he stopped. He slammed his fist onto the table. "Damn it!" he shouted. The sound was tinny through the microphone, but the anger was real. Biometrics. He had forgotten that Lily used a fingerprint lock. He could not access the drive without her. I watched him stare at the closed door of the master bedroom. I saw the calculation in his eyes. A decent man would hesitate. A decent man would realize he was about to cross a line from which there is no return. But Brian was not a decent man. He was $8 million in debt to people who owned bone saws, and he had a deadline that was breathing down his neck. He marched toward the bedroom door. This is the part of the story that haunts my nightmares. This is the part where I have to ask you to understand the terrible arithmetic of survival. I watched my son-in-law kick the bedroom door open. I heard my daughter scream. It was a sound of pure confusion and terror, waking up from a deep sleep to find a monster standing over her. "Get up!" Brian roared. I saw him drag her out into the living room. She was wearing silk pajamas, and her hair was a mess. She was stumbling, trying to find her footing, trying to understand why the man she loved was hurting her. He threw her onto the sofa. She curled into a ball, protecting her head. It was a reflex. It told me this was not the first time he had been rough with her. "Unlock it!" Brian screamed, pointing at the laptop. "Open the damn computer, Lily!" Lily looked at him with wide, tear-filled eyes. "Brian, what is happening?" she sobbed. "You are hurting me." "Do it!" Brian yelled. He raised his hand. I flinched in my car. My hand shot to the door handle. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to run, to drive my car through the lobby doors, to sprint up those 40 flights of stairs and tear him apart with my bare hands. I am 76 years old, but in that moment, I felt strong enough to kill. Then he hit her. It was a sharp, brutal slap across the face. Lily's head snapped back. She cried out a high-pitched sound that pierced through the speaker and stabbed directly into my heart. My finger hovered over the call button on my phone. 911 was already dialed. All I had to do was press send. If I called now, the police would be there in 5 minutes. They would break down the door. They would arrest Brian. They would take Lily to a hospital. But then what? My mind, the cold, logical machine that had kept airplanes safe for 30 years, took over. If the police arrested Brian tonight, he would be charged with domestic battery, maybe assault. He would call his lawyer. He would post bail by morning. And the moment he walked out of that jail cell, the syndicate would know he had failed. They would know the deal was off. They would not wait for a trial. They would execute him, and they would execute Lily to tie up loose ends. Or worse, Brian would talk his way out of it, blaming the stress, blaming the alcohol, and Lily, battered and brainwashed, might even drop the charges. I could not save her with a temporary fix. I needed a permanent solution. I needed him to go away forever. I needed him to commit a crime so severe that no lawyer could save him and no bail bondsman would touch him. I needed him to commit federal espionage. So I sat in my car and I watched. I dug my fingernails into the steering wheel until I felt warm blood trickle down my palm. I forced myself to breathe. I forced myself to be a witness to my daughter's pain because her pain was the key to her freedom. I whispered her name in the darkness. I begged her to forgive me. I begged her to be strong. "Do it, Lily," I whispered to the screen. "Just open the computer, baby. Give him what he wants." On the screen, Lily was holding her cheek. She looked at Brian with a look of total devastation. The love was gone from her eyes, replaced by a cold realization. She saw him now. She finally saw him. She reached out with a trembling hand. She pressed her thumb against the sensor. The laptop chimed. The screen unlocked. Brian shoved her aside. He did not even look at her. He did not care that she was weeping. He only cared about the data. He pulled a black USB drive from his pocket. This was it. The moment of transfer. He thought he was about to copy the security codes for the airport grid. He thought he was about to save his own skin. He plugged the drive into the USB port. On my laptop screen, a new window popped up. It was a terminal window, black with green text. It was the virus I had written in my basement. It had been dormant, waiting for a connection. Target acquired. The text read, "Handshake complete." Brian was typing furiously, copying the files I had planted. He was taking the bait, hook, line, and sinker. But as he copied the fake codes onto his drive, my virus was silently sliding the other way. It was moving from the laptop onto his drive, and from there it would infect any computer he plugged it into. It was a digital parasite. A backdoor Trojan that would give me and the FBI total access to his network, his communications, and his location. I saw Brian smile again. He pulled the drive out and held it up to the light. He looked triumphant. He looked like a king. He turned to Lily. She was still curled on the sofa, weeping softly. "Stop crying," he snapped. "I just saved our lives. You should be thanking me." He grabbed his jacket and headed for the door. He was leaving. He was going to meet his handlers. He was going to deliver the package. I watched him leave. Then I watched Lily. She sat up slowly. She looked at the door, then she looked at the window. For a terrifying second, I thought she might walk toward the balcony. I thought I had pushed her too far. But she didn't. She curled her knees to her chest and buried her face in her arms. She was broken, but she was alive. I let out a breath that felt like it had been held for a lifetime. The hardest part was over. I had let the wolf bite my child to lure him into the trap. Now the trap was set. I picked up my phone. I did not call the police. I dialed a number I had not used in years. It rang once. "This is Agent Miller," a voice said. "Miller, it is Henry Caldwell," I said. My voice was steady cold and devoid of any emotion. "The package is in transit. The target has the drive. The tracking beacon is active." There was a pause. "Do you have confirmation of the felony?" Miller asked. I looked at the frozen image of my daughter on the screen. I looked at the bruise already forming on her cheek. "I have confirmation," I said. "He has possession of the classified data." And Miller. "Yes, Henry. When you take him down," I said, "make sure it hurts." I hung up the phone. I started the car. I was not going home. I was going to follow the signal. I was going to be there when the steel trap snapped shut. The necessary cruelty was finished. Now it was time for the necessary justice. The virus I planted was a piece of art. It was not a sledgehammer that smashed through walls. It was a mist. It seeped into the operating system of Brian's computer silently and invisible to any standard antivirus software. I had written the code to mimic the background processes of the system itself. To Brian, it looked like his computer was just running a bit warm, processing the massive file transfer of the security keys. But in reality, the fan was spinning because my code was rewriting his permissions in real time. I sat in the back of an unmarked surveillance van parked 2 streets away from the penthouse. Next to me sat Agent Miller, a man with a jaw like a granite block and eyes that had seen too much darkness. We were staring at a wall of monitors. The moment Brian plugged that USB drive in, the center screen flickered to life. It was not a grainy hidden camera feed anymore. It was high definition. We were looking directly through the webcam of Brian's laptop. We could see the sweat on his forehead. We could see the dilated pupils of his eyes as he watched the progress bar load. And more importantly, we could hear him. My virus had hijacked the microphone array, turning his high-end laptop into a broadcasting station. We watched him pull the USB drive out. He kissed it. He actually kissed the plastic casing like it was a religious icon. Then he reached for his phone. Not his regular smartphone, but a bulky satellite phone he pulled from a locked drawer. He dialed a number. Miller leaned forward and tapped the audio technician on the shoulder. The technician isolated the frequency and boosted the gain. Brian's voice filled the van, clear as a bell. "It is done," he said. His voice was shaking, but this time it was with excitement, not fear. "I have the source code, the complete architecture for the cargo screening grid." There was a pause as he listened to the voice on the other end. We could not hear the other person, but we did not need to. Brian's answers filled in the blanks. "Yes, the bypass is included," he said. "Gate number 4, just like we discussed. The shift supervisor is on my payroll, but with this code you will not even need him to look away. The system will auto-clear the container. It will look like a glitch in the logging software. Your shipment walks right through customs without a single scan." Miller looked at me. He did not smile, but there was a grim satisfaction in his eyes. This was the smoking gun. This was proof of conspiracy to traffic illicit goods through a federal port of entry. It was enough to put Brian away for 20 years. But then Brian kept talking, and the satisfaction in the van turned into a suffocating horror. "Yeah, I know the risks," Brian said. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city rain. "Do not worry about the loose ends. I have a plan for that too." He paused, listening. Then he laughed. It was a cold sound. "The wife is a liability," he said. "She is weak. She is already cracking under the pressure. And the old man, Henry. He is a problem. He is senile, but he still has friends in high places. I cannot risk him waking up one day and remembering where he really put those keys." My hands clenched into fists so tight, my knuckles turned white. I felt the blood pounding in my ears. I knew what was coming. I prayed I was wrong, but I knew. Once the shipment clears tomorrow night, Brian said, his voice dropping to a whisper that was somehow louder than a scream. I am going to stage an accident. A gas leak in the penthouse. It happens. Old pipes. Faulty regulators. Lily will be asleep. I will invite Henry over for a celebratory drink to bury the hatchet. 2 birds, 1 spark. The explosion will take out the apartment and any evidence on the laptop. It will be a tragedy. A terrible, heartbreaking tragedy. The silence in the van was absolute. The air conditioning was humming, but nobody was breathing. He just conspired to commit double homicide, Miller whispered. That is capital murder, premeditated. I stood up. The chair scraped loud against the metal floor. That is it, I said. My voice was calm, but it felt like there was a fire raging in my throat. We have him. We have the recording. Get the team. We are going in. I reached for the door handle. I was going to kill him. I did not care about the law anymore. I was going to walk into that apartment and throw him off the balcony before he could ever touch a hair on my daughter's head. Sit down, Henry. Miller's voice was sharp. He grabbed my arm. His grip was iron. Let go of me, I snarled. You heard him. He is going to kill her. He said tomorrow night, Miller said. He will not move until the shipment clears. He needs her alive to keep up appearances until the deal is done. I do not care about his timeline, I shouted. I care about my daughter. We are taking him down, now. Miller stood up and blocked my path. He looked me in the eye. If we take him now, Henry, we get him. Just him. But the shipment, the drugs, the weapons, the radioactive material, whatever is in that container coming through Gate 4 tomorrow turns around and disappears. The syndicate goes underground. The boss on the other end of that phone vanishes. And in 6 months, they find another desperate gambler to open another door. He put his hands on my shoulders. We have a chance to take down the entire network, Miller said. We need the shipment to land. We need to catch them in the act of transfer. That connects the code to the cargo and the cargo to the syndicate. It is the difference between a domestic dispute and a federal terrorism case. I looked at him. I hated him in that moment. I hated his logic. I hated his bigger picture. You are asking me to leave her in there with him, I whispered. You are asking me to let her sleep next to the man who just planned her murder. We have eyes on her, Miller said, pointing to the screens. We have audio. We have a sniper team setting up on the roof across the street right now. If he so much as raises a hand against her, we breach. I promise you, Henry, we will not let her die. But we need 12 hours. 12 hours. It sounded like a sentence. I looked at the screen. Brian had hung up the phone. He was pouring himself a drink. He looked relaxed. He looked like a man who had just finished a hard day's work. He walked into the living room. Lily was still on the couch. She had stopped crying, but she was staring at the wall with a 1,000-yard stare. She looked broken. Brian sat down next to her. He put his arm around her. Hey, babe, he said. His voice was soft, sickeningly sweet. It is over. I fixed it. We are going to be rich, Lily. We are going to be free. Lily flinched when he touched her. She pulled away slightly. Don't, Brian, she whispered. Please. He laughed and kissed her temple. You just need some rest. Tomorrow is a big day. We are going to celebrate. My treat. I watched him touch her hair. The same hands that he planned to use to open a gas valve. The same hands that he planned to use to light a match. I sank back into the chair. I felt old. older than I had ever felt. 12 hours, I said. Not a minute more. Mark it, Miller said to the technician. Operation ends at 0800 tomorrow. I sat there in the dark van. The smell of stale coffee and ozone filled my nose. On the screen, Brian stood up and went to the bedroom. He left Lily alone in the living room. She curled up on the cushions. She pulled a blanket over her head. And then through the high-fidelity audio of the hijacked laptop, I heard it. She was crying. It was not the loud sobbing of before. It was a quiet, hopeless weeping. The sound of a woman who believes she has been abandoned by everyone. She thought I had given up. She thought I had handed over the keys and walked away to save myself. She thought she was alone in the cage with the beast. I reached up and touched the headphones I was wearing. The irony was bitter, like poison. She had given me earbuds to block out the world, but now I was using technology to listen to her heartbreak. I am here, baby, I whispered to the screen, knowing she could not hear me. Daddy is here. Just hold on. Just hold on a little longer. I stared at the timestamp on the monitor. 10:42 p.m. The seconds ticked by. Tick, tick, tick. Every second was an agony. Every minute was a test of endurance. I watched her shoulders shake. I watched the rise and fall of her breath. I measured her life in pixels and bandwidth. I had spent my career building systems that could not fail. Systems that were redundant, secure, and logical. But there was no logic here. There was only fear and the terrible weight of a gamble. I was gambling with the only thing in the world that mattered to me. I closed my eyes, but I did not take off the headset. I listened to her cry. I engraved that sound into my memory. I would use it. When the time came when the 12 hours were up, I would use that sound to fuel the fire that would burn Brian's world to ash. The long night had begun, and I would not blink until it was over. The sun rose over Seattle like a gray bruise on the horizon. It was that hour of the morning when the streetlights are still on, but the world is waking up, a time that feels suspended between nightmares and reality. I sat in the surveillance van and watched the digital clock on the dashboard tick down to 0600. My coffee was cold. My hands were steady, but my heart felt like it was beating inside a chest made of lead. Beside me, Agent Miller adjusted his earpiece. He looked at the team leader in the front seat and gave a single sharp nod. "Execute," he said. There was no siren. There was no warning. Just the synchronized movement of 12 men in black tactical gear swarming the entrance of the building. We watched on the monitors as they bypassed the doorman who was too terrified to even reach for the phone. We watched them pile into the service elevator. We watched the floor numbers climb. I did not blink. I could not blink. I was about to watch the destruction of my daughter's life, and I owed it to her to witness every second of it. On the screen inside the apartment, everything was quiet. Brian was asleep in the master bedroom, probably dreaming of the millions he thought he had secured. Lily was on the couch where she had been all night, curled up under a blanket, exhausted from crying. Then the world exploded. The sound of the battering ram hitting the front door echoed through our audio feed like a thunderclap. Wood splintered, metal groaned. The door flew off its hinges, and the black wave of the SWAT team poured into the penthouse. "FBI, get on the ground. Federal agents, get down now." The shouting was deafening. I saw Lily jolt awake. She screamed, a sound of pure terror, scrambling backward on the sofa, pulling the blanket up as if it could protect her from assault rifles. 2 agents were on her in a second. They did not treat her like a victim. They treated her like a threat. They grabbed her arms and pulled her off the couch, forcing her face down onto the expensive carpet. "Clear left. Clear right. Secure the female." I watched an agent pull her hands behind her back. I heard the metallic click of the handcuffs, the cold cuffs. Those were the hardest sounds I have ever had to hear. The sound of my child losing her freedom. The sound of metal biting into the wrists I used to hold when we crossed the street. From the bedroom, Brian emerged. He was wearing boxer shorts and a look of absolute confusion that quickly turned to cowardice. He saw the laser sights dancing on his chest. He saw the agents swarming his living room. "Do not shoot," he screamed. He threw his hands up so fast he almost lost his balance. "I am unarmed. Do not shoot me. Get on the ground." Brian dropped to his knees. He looked around the room, his eyes darting wildly. He saw Lily on the floor being hauled to her feet by a female officer. He saw the laptop on the table, the one with the USB drive still sticking out of it. "It is not me," he yelled. His voice cracked. "It is her. It is my wife." I watched the screen in disgust. I watched the man who had promised to love and cherish my daughter point a finger at her to save his own skin. "She is the hacker," Brian shouted. "It is her laptop. Look at it. It is her computer. She forced me to help her. I did not know what she was doing." Lily looked up at him. Her hair was in her face. She looked like she had been slapped. "Brian," she whispered. "What are you saying?" "Shut up, you crazy bitch," Brian yelled. He was sweating now, panting like a dog. "Officer, she is mentally unstable. She has been planning this for weeks." I tried to stop her. "Check the fingerprints on the device. They are hers." He was right. Of course he was right. Because I had designed it that way. I had made sure Lily opened the laptop. I had made sure her prints were on the listening device. I had built a cage of evidence around her, not to trap her, but to shield her. But she did not know that. All she knew was that her husband was betraying her. The agents did not care about their domestic dispute. They hauled Brian to his feet and cuffed him. They marched them both toward the door. Miller tapped me on the shoulder. "It is time, Henry," he said. "We need to be seen." I nodded. I opened the door of the van and stepped out into the cold morning air. The rain had started again, a light mist that coated everything in a sheen of misery. I walked to the police line. A small crowd had already gathered. Neighbors in bathrobes walking their dogs. Early morning joggers. The doorman. They were all whispering, pointing at the building. Then the doors opened. Brian came out first. He was struggling, shouting legal threats, demanding to speak to his lawyer. When he saw me standing by the curb, he froze. "Henry," he screamed. "Henry, tell them. Tell them it was Lily. You know she has been acting strange. You know she is sick." I looked at him. I looked him right in the eye, and I gave him nothing. No anger, no sadness. Just the blank stare of a stranger. Then they brought Lily out. She looked small between the two large agents. She was stumbling in her bare feet. She looked terrified and confused. She was scanning the crowd, looking for a friendly face, looking for hope. Then she saw me. Her face crumpled. It was a look of such raw relief that it almost brought me to my knees. "Dad," she cried out. Her voice was raw. "Dad, help me." She tried to move toward me, but the agents held her back. "Dad, tell them," she begged. "Tell them I did not do anything. Brian did it. Please, Dad." "Why are they arresting me?" The neighbors turned to look at me. They saw an old man standing with his hands in his pockets, watching his daughter beg for her life. They waited for me to run to her. They waited for me to shout at the police to demand her release, but I did not move. I stood there like a statue. I watched the tears stream down her face. I watched the confusion turn to horror as she realized I was not coming to save her. "Dad," she whispered, "why are you just standing there?" An old woman next to me wearing a heavy coat and walking a poodle turned to me. She looked at me with pure venom. "Do something, you monster," she hissed. "That is your daughter. How can you just watch?" I did not answer her. I could not explain that if I interfered now, if I showed the world that Lily was innocent, I would be signing her death warrant. The syndicate was watching. I knew they were watching. If they thought Lily was a victim who knew too much, they would kill her in custody. They would get to her before she could testify. But if they thought she was the mastermind, if they thought she was the hacker who had betrayed them, if they thought she was a criminal facing 20 years in prison, then she was an asset. Or at least she was a problem that was contained. I needed her to look guilty. I needed the world to believe that she was part of the scheme. So I let her cry. I let her scream my name until her voice gave out. "I am sorry, Lily," I whispered inside my mind. "I am so sorry, baby. But this is the only way." They shoved her into the back of a separate squad car. She looked at me through the glass one last time. The look in her eyes was not fear anymore. It was hatred. She thought I had abandoned her. She thought I was letting her take the fall. The car doors slammed shut. The sirens wailed. The convoy began to move, rolling down the wet street toward the federal detention center. Brian's car went left. Lily's car went right. I stood on the curb until the taillights disappeared around the corner. The neighbors were still staring at me, whispering about the cold-hearted father who let his daughter rot. They did not know. They could never know. Miller walked up beside me. He handed me a cup of coffee. He looked at the crowd, then he looked at me with a new kind of respect. "That was the hardest thing I have ever seen a man do," Miller said quietly. I took the coffee. My hands were finally shaking. The adrenaline was fading, and the grief was rushing in. "Is she safe?" I asked. My voice sounded like it was coming from underwater. Miller nodded. "She is in the system now. We have her booked as a primary suspect in a national security investigation. That gives us the authority to lock her down tight. No bail, no visitors, no contact with the general population." "Good," I said. I turned to Miller. I looked him dead in the eye. "Put her in solitary confinement," I said. Miller blinked. He looked surprised. "Henry, she is not a criminal. Solitary is rough. It is a concrete box. It breaks people." "I know what it is," I said. "But it is the only place in that prison where a shank cannot reach her. It is the only place where a guard paid off by the Russians cannot look the other way while she has an accident in the shower." I took a sip of the coffee. It tasted like ash. "Keep her in solitary, Miller. Keep her isolated. Let her think I betrayed her. Let her hate me. Let her think she is going to rot in there for the rest of her life. Because as long as she is in that box, she is alive. And as long as she is alive, I can finish this." Miller nodded slowly. He understood. He took out his phone and made a call. Warden Miller said, "I have a special request for the new intake. Isolate her. 23-hour lockdown. High-value target." "Yes, understood." He hung up. "It is done," he said. I looked at the empty street. The rain was falling harder now, washing away the tire tracks of the police cars. I felt a hole in my chest where my heart used to be. I had just sent my only child to a living hell to save her from a grave. "Now comes the hard part," I said. Miller looked at me. "Hard part? Henry, you just watched your daughter get arrested. What could be harder than that?" I crushed the coffee cup in my hand. "Brian," I said, "he thinks he can talk his way out of this. He thinks he can blame her. I need to make sure that when he walks into that interrogation room, he realizes that he is not the one holding the cards." I turned and walked toward the surveillance van. "I need to have a conversation with my son-in-law," I said. "And this time I am not bringing wine. I am bringing the truth, and it is going to bury him." The air inside Federal Interrogation Room 3 was cold enough to see your breath, but Brian did not seem to mind. He sat on the metal chair with his legs crossed, looking every inch the misunderstood businessman. He was wearing a fresh shirt his lawyer had brought him, and he had that confident, practiced look of a man who believes he can talk his way out of a firing squad. I stood behind the one-way glass with Agent Miller watching him spin his web. The audio feed piped his voice into the observation room, crisp and clear. My wife has been struggling with severe mental health issues for years, Brian was saying to the two agents across the table. His voice was smooth, filled with a fake sorrow that made my skin crawl. She becomes paranoid. She invents scenarios. This whole smuggling idea was hers. She bought the equipment. She contacted the buyers on the dark web. I only found out about it last night when she pulled a gun on me and forced me to drive to the airport. He paused to take a sip of water. His hand did not even shake. I tried to de-escalate the situation, he continued. I pretended to go along with it to keep us safe. I was just trying to buy time until I could call you guys. That is why I was holding the drive when you came in. I was trying to secure the evidence. His lawyer, a sharp-faced man in an expensive suit, nodded solemnly. My client is a victim of domestic abuse and coercion, he said. We have medical records showing Mrs. Caldwell has a history of anxiety. We expect him to be released immediately. Miller looked at me. He raised an eyebrow. You ready? Miller asked. I adjusted my tie. I did not feel like a father anymore. I did not feel like a retiree. I felt like a machine built for a single purpose. I am ready, I said. Miller opened the heavy steel door, and we walked into the room. Brian looked up. When he saw me, a flicker of annoyance crossed his face, but he quickly masked it with a look of pity. Henry, he said, thank God you are here. Maybe you can explain to these officers about Lily's condition. Tell them about the mood swings. Tell them how she gets when she forgets her medication. I did not answer him. I did not even look at him. I walked to the end of the table and placed my briefcase down. I opened it slowly. Who is this? The lawyer asked sharply. My client has not waived his right to privacy. This is Henry Caldwell, Miller said, closing the door and leaning against it. He is not here as a family member. He is here as a special technical consultant for the Department of Homeland Security. He is the architect of the system your client tried to breach. Brian laughed. It was a short, nervous sound. Henry, come on. Stop playing dress-up. Look, I know you are upset about Lily getting arrested, but lying to the feds is not going to help her. I sat down. I folded my hands on the table. I am not here to help her, Brian, I said. My voice was low and devoid of emotion. I am here to clarify the technical aspects of the evidence found in your possession. Brian rolled his eyes. This is ridiculous. I told you I do not know anything about the tech. Lily handled all of that. She is the hacker. Is she? I asked. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out the small, matte, black box. I set it on the table between us. The earbuds. Brian stared at them. For the first time, his confidence wavered. He shifted in his seat. What is this? He asked. You gave these to me 3 days ago, Brian, I said. You told me they were for listening to music. You said they were a gift. So what? Brian snapped. It was a birthday present. Is it a crime to give a gift now? I tapped the case. The green light blinked. We analyzed the firmware, I said. These are not just headphones. They contain a military-grade proximity data siphon and a high-gain microphone. They were designed to steal my security credentials and record my conversations. Brian shrugged. Like I said, Lily bought them. She must have modified them. She is obsessed with spying on people. I nodded slowly. That is a convenient story. But there is a flaw in it. What flaw? Brian asked. The flaw is that I found the bug on the first day I said. The room went silent. Brian blinked. His lawyer stopped writing on his notepad. Excuse me, Brian said. I found the bug, I repeated. I knew what they were the moment I walked into my office. I knew you were listening, and instead of destroying them, I decided to use them. I leaned forward. You think you were listening to a senile old man mumbling about lost files, I said. But you were listening to a performance, Brian. Every word I said for the last 3 days was a script. The phone call to Bob, the trip to the train station, the email about the laptop. It was all a lie. I fed you exactly what you wanted to hear because I needed you to believe you were winning. Brian's face was starting to pale. A sheen of sweat appeared on his forehead. You are lying, he whispered. You do not have the skills. You are a dinosaur. I am a systems architect, I said, and you are a user who forgot to check his permissions. I opened my laptop. I turned the screen so he could see it. When you plugged that USB drive into Lily's computer, you thought you were downloading my security keys, I said. But you were actually uploading a payload I wrote. A reverse backdoor Trojan. I hit a key. A sound file appeared on the screen. It was a waveform, jagged and loud. You said Lily was the mastermind, I said. You said she forced you. You said you were just trying to survive. I pressed play. Brian's voice filled the small interrogation room. It was loud, clear, and undeniable. It was the recording from last night. The wife is a liability. She is weak. She is already cracking under the pressure. Once the shipment clears tomorrow night, I am going to stage an accident. A gas leak in the penthouse. The explosion will take out the apartment and any evidence. 2 birds. 1 spark. The recording ended. The silence that followed was heavier than lead. The lawyer slowly closed his notepad. He pushed his chair back a few inches, distancing himself from his client. He looked at Brian with a mixture of shock and professional disgust. That sounds like premeditated conspiracy to commit double homicide, Miller said from the door. Brian was shaking now. His hands were gripping the edge of the table so hard his knuckles were white. That is out of context, he stammered. I was role-playing. I was just saying what the bad guys wanted to hear. Stop, I said. I stood up. I loomed over him. You still do not get it, do you, Brian? You think the recording is the worst part. You think going to prison for murder is your biggest problem. I pointed to the earbuds. I told you I used these against you, I said. That means I heard everything, including the call you made to your handlers. I heard about the debt. $8 million to the Volkov syndicate. Brian flinched as if I had hit him. And I heard about the shipment, I continued. The container coming through Gate 4 tonight. You sent them the code I gave you. You told them the path was clear. I smiled. It was a cold, predatory smile. But the code I gave you was fake, Brian. It did not whitelist the container. It was a silent trigger. Brian's eyes went wide. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The moment that container hit the scanner at the port, about 20 minutes ago, the system did not wave it through, I said. It locked the facility down. Port Authority police and FBI tactical teams were waiting. They opened the crate. They found the weapons. And they found 3 members of the Volkov Lieutenant Circle waiting to receive the goods. I leaned down until my face was inches from his. They are in custody, Brian. All of them. And do you know what the first thing they did was? They gave up the name of the man who sold them the bad code. They gave up the man who set them up. Brian looked like he was going to pass out. He was gasping for air. You set me up, he wheezed. I destroyed you, I corrected. You have 2 problems now, Brian. Problem 1 is the United States government, which is going to charge you with treason, espionage, and conspiracy to murder. That is life in a supermax without parole. I paused. But problem 2 is much worse. The Volkov syndicate lost $8 million in product and 3 top men because of you. They think you are a snitch. They think you worked with the feds to trap them. Brian started to dry heave. He clutched his stomach. Word travels fast in prison, I whispered. especially when the Russian mob puts a bounty on your head. You will be safe in custody for maybe a day, maybe two, but eventually you have to go to the yard. Eventually, the guards have to look away. I stood up and straightened my jacket. You tried to burn my daughter alive, I said. You tried to turn her into ash. So I turned you into a dead man, walking. Brian tried to speak. He tried to say my name. But all that came out was a strangled sob. He slumped forward, his forehead hitting the cold metal table, his body convulsed. Then he vomited. It was a violent retching sound. He threw up all over the table, all over the files, all over the matte black earbuds that had started it all. He was crying and choking, shaking uncontrollably. I looked at the mess. I looked at the man who had thought he was a king just yesterday. He was nothing but a terrified child now. I picked up my briefcase. I stepped back to avoid the splatter. I turned to Miller. "I think we are done here," I said. Miller nodded. He looked at the lawyer. "You might want to get him a bucket," Miller said, "and a public defender. I have a feeling you are not going to want to touch this case." The lawyer stood up and walked out without a word, leaving Brian alone in his filth. I walked out of the room. I did not look back. I could still hear the sound of him retching echoing down the hallway. It was not a pleasant sound, but to me it sounded like justice. The interrogation was over. The hunter had killed the wolf. Now there was only one thing left to do. I had to go get my daughter out of the box. The steel gates of the Federal Detention Center opened with a slow, grinding sound that echoed the heaviness in my chest. I had been standing next to my car for 2 hours, waiting. The morning fog of Seattle had lifted, but the air was still crisp and smelled of pine and damp earth. I checked my watch for the 100th time. 48 hours. That was how long she had been inside. To the legal system, it was just a standard holding period while evidence was processed. To me, it was a lifetime. Then I saw her. Lily walked out of the small side door. She was wearing the same clothes she had been arrested in, wrinkled and stained. Her hair was pulled back in a messy knot, and her face was scrubbed clean of makeup, revealing the dark circles under her eyes. She did not look like the glamorous woman who lived in a penthouse. She looked like a survivor of a shipwreck. She stood on the concrete, blinking in the sunlight, looking around with the skittish movements of a frightened animal. When she saw me, she did not run. She stopped. Her body went rigid. I saw the hesitation in her eyes, the flash of hurt and betrayal. She was remembering the sidewalk. She was remembering me standing still while the handcuffs clicked around her wrists. She was remembering the silence of the last 2 days in a concrete box where she thought her father had left her to rot. I walked toward her slowly. I kept my hands open where she could see them. "Lily," I said softly. She flinched. She looked at the ground. "Is it over?" she whispered. Her voice was raspy, like she had been screaming, or maybe like she had not spoken in days. "It is over," I said. "The charges are dropped. The record is expunged. You are free." She looked up at me then, and the pain in her eyes hit me harder than any physical blow. "You let them take me, Dad," she said. Her voice broke. "You stood there, and you let them take me." I was so scared. I was all alone in that dark room. "I thought you hated me. I thought you believed him." I reached out and took her cold hands in mine. I pulled her into me. She was stiff at first, resisting the comfort, but then she collapsed against my chest, sobbing. I held her tight just like I used to when she was a little girl and woke up from a nightmare. "I did not put you in there to punish you, Lily," I whispered into her hair. "I put you in there to hide you. The men Brian worked for, they kill witnesses. If you had been on the street yesterday, you would be dead. That cell was the only place in the world where they could not touch you." She pulled back, sniffing, wiping her eyes with her sleeve. She looked at me, searching my face for the truth. "Brian," she asked. "Where is he?" I opened the car door for her. "Brian is gone," I said, "and he is never coming back." We drove in silence for a long time. I did not go to her apartment. That place was a crime scene now, a monument to a lie. I drove us to Alki Beach. It was a place we used to come when she was a child to watch the ferries cross the Sound and eat fish and chips wrapped in newspaper. I parked the car facing the water. The waves were gray and choppy whitecaps dancing in the wind. We got out and walked down to the water's edge. We found a piece of driftwood and sat down. The wind was cold, but it felt clean. It felt like it was blowing away the stench of the interrogation room and the fear of the last 3 days. Lily wrapped her arms around herself, shivering slightly. "He is going to prison, isn't he?" she asked, staring at the horizon. "For a very long time," I said. "The recording I got from his laptop was damning. Conspiracy, espionage, attempted murder. The federal prosecutors are not going to offer him a deal. And even if they did, he has nowhere to go. He burned every bridge he had." She nodded slowly. She picked up a smooth stone and turned it over in her fingers. "I felt so stupid, Dad," she said quietly. "I thought he loved me. I thought the bruises were my fault. I thought if I just helped him with this one thing, he would go back to being the man I married." I put my arm around her shoulders. "You were not stupid, Lily," I said firmly. "You were manipulated. He was a predator. He found the kindest person in the room, and he exploited her. That is what predators do. It is not your fault that you have a good heart. It is his fault that he tried to break it." She leaned her head on my shoulder. We sat there for a while, just watching the seagulls dive and call. Then she asked the question I knew was coming. "How did you know, Dad?" she asked. She looked up at me. "Brian is young. He understands technology better than anyone I know. He had encryption, he had hackers, he had everything. You still use a flip phone sometimes. You have not written code in 5 years. How did you beat him?" "Beat Tool." I reached into my pocket. I pulled out the matte black charging case. I opened it one last time. The earbuds sat there innocuous and silent. I looked at them. They were a marvel of modern engineering. Sleek, powerful, dangerous. I smiled a tired, sad smile. "Brian made a classic mistake," I said. "He confused complexity with wisdom. He thought that because he had the newest tools, he had the advantage. He forgot that the tools are only as good as the hand that holds them." I took one of the earbuds out and held it up to the gray light. "He gave me these to listen to me," I said. "He wanted to hear the weakness of an old man. But he forgot that I built the systems he was trying to break. I wrote the foundational code for the security grid before he was even born. He was trying to run a sprint, but I was running a marathon." I looked at Lily. "I may be old, sweetheart," I said. "I may not know how to use TikTok. I may not understand why people buy pictures of monkeys for $1 million, but I know people. I know patterns, and I know how to protect what belongs to me." I stood up and walked to the water's edge. The tide was coming in frothy and loud. These things I said, raising my voice over the sound of the surf. They represent everything that went wrong. The lies, the surveillance, the fear. I drew my arm back. We do not need them anymore. I threw the case as hard as I could. It spun through the air, a black arc against the gray sky. It splashed into the dark water 50 yards out. The waves swallowed it instantly. It was gone. The link was broken. The virus was done. The reboot was complete. I walked back to Lily. She was smiling for the first time in days. It was a small smile, fragile but real. I reached into my other pocket. I pulled out a small box wrapped in brown paper. "I have a new gift for you," I said, handing it to her. She looked at it warily. "No more electronics," she said, half joking. "Open it," I said. She tore the paper. Inside were two things. The first was a small pink canister. Pepper spray, she asked, raising an eyebrow. Standard issue, I said. High concentration. If any man ever tries to grab your arm again, you do not ask him to stop. You do not cry. You blind him. She laughed. It was a watery sound, but it was the best sound I had heard in years. And the second thing she asked, pulling out an envelope. She opened it. Inside were 2 airline tickets. First class. One way. Paris, she breathed. I figured we both need a change of scenery, I said. I have not been to Europe since your mother passed away, and I hear the coffee is better there. But Dad, she said, looking at the date, this is for tomorrow. I shrugged. Why wait? The lease on your apartment is in Brian's name. Let the lawyers fight over the furniture. Let the bank take the car. You do not need any of it. We are starting over. We are rebooting the system, Lily. Clean slate. She looked at the tickets, then she looked at me. Her eyes filled with tears again, but these were happy tears. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for saving my life. I kissed her forehead. I will always save your life, kiddo, I said. That is the job description. We walked back to the car, arm in arm. The wind was at our backs, pushing us forward. I looked back at the ocean one last time. Somewhere down there in the deep, cold water, the technology that had almost destroyed us was sinking into the mud. Brian was in a cell. The syndicate was dismantled, and my daughter was safe. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I was 76 years old. I was tired. My joints ached when it rained. But as I opened the car door for Lily, I felt strong. I had proven something to the world and to myself. I had proven that you do not need to be young to be dangerous. You do not need to be modern to be effective. As we drove away, leaving the gray city behind, I thought about the lesson Brian had learned the hard way. The digital world might be complicated. It might be full of firewalls and encryption and backdoors. But the rules of a father are simple. They are written in blood and bone, not in binary code. You can steal my money. You can insult my legacy. You can even try to trick me. But there is one rule you never break. Don't ever touch the daughter of an old wolf. If you enjoyed this story and you believe that family is worth fighting for, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that it is never too late to fight back. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had to use old school wisdom to solve a modern problem? I would love to hear your story. Until next time, stay safe and watch your back.